So the Nintendo Switch Online feature gets a bit of a bad rap. I won't say much on that, though I will admit that I spent perhaps a bit too much on an annual subscription to a service that I mostly use to play ancient video games of a previous millennium. However, another quirk with this feature is that you get the opportunity to try out certain games for free for a limited trial run, and sure enough, recently one of these games happens to be the big favorite for some people, Vampire Survivors, originally released in 2022 for a variety of game consoles courtesy of Ponkel. It's a game some of you may have played, are familiar with, and are either huge fans of this game and have stuck with it for years on end, or you're just baffled by how something like this could catch on with people. And well, count me as one of those folks who are baffled by this game's popularity and mere existence. But you know, the thing is, I'm looking at this from a distance and I'm wondering what's so special about this thing. What's the big deal? It doesn't look like much. I mean, you control a little bonhomme being swarmed by other little monster things, none of which look like vampires unless you want to count the bats, but I don't know, who are the vampire survivors of this thing? Is it this guy? Is it that guy? Who's, you know... I guess for a mobile thing it looks fine, I guess, but people are playing this on their consoles and their big PC gaming rigs. Machines that people paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for the pleasure of playing this rather quaint-looking game that looks like something that was pulled out of Newgrounds many moons ago. Ultimately, I accepted that this is one of those things that I'm just never going to get, which is fine. There's plenty of things that I don't get the popularity of, but I'm fine with because I just don't care. And then along comes this Nintendo trial period for this game, where I could play it on Switch for a period, just in time for Halloween, I suppose. And sure enough, I gave it a shot. I sated my curiosity. I admired the only graphically impressive asset in this entire game with the title screen. And after about a weekend's worth of play sessions, my reaction to Vampire Survivors, the craze that's claiming the soul of many... Really? That's it? This is all you do? This is the... Needless to say that after a couple days of gameplay, I decided not to purchase Vampire Survivors and promptly deleted the game from my Switch. I guess the appeal is destined to elude me till the end of days, and that's okay. I've got plenty of other vampire killing games that suit my fancy just fine, and they are, quite frankly, much better games by leaps and bounds. And yes, I'd rather be playing Haunted Castle, the old one, than Vampire Survivors any day of the week. Now, if that doesn't trigger a few frail souls, then I don't know what will. Vampire Survivors, for those who have not played this thing or even heard of it, by which point in time I am envious of your ignorance and innocence. But this is what they call a roguelike shoot 'em up. You pick a character, you basically move them around while they attack automatically. You don't have any fire buttons or other controls other than movement. Your left stick moves your little bonhomme around, your right stick moves your little bonhomme around, the D-pad moves your little bonhomme around, and the face buttons do nothing. What, you couldn't program movement for the face buttons? They figured that shit out with Smash TV on Super Nintendo decades ago, Stickolis. Anyway, you move around this open space, your little guy attacks, and enemies killed will drop these gems that you collect to build up your levels. Each time you increase the level, you can choose a new perk to boost your power, either new attacks or boost your existing attacks so they cover more area or do more damage, or just general things like increasing your maximum health or just your overall resistance to damage, among other things. There are also these candle things that you can break for other items like meat for health, coins for money to buy things, and other gimmicks that may pop up like stopwatches and things of that nature. Because you see, this takes inspiration from that one game there with all the vampire killers, but without the fun gameplay associated, but I digress. Basically, the longer you play, the more monsters the game throws at you, and eventually you die, or you complete whatever campaign there is, which is usually how these rogue things work. And then you use whatever money you won to buy permanent upgrades, extra characters, things of that nature, and you play again, from scratch. Again, the whole concept of these rogue things is to start anew and see how far you get each time you play, and, well, if you're not really good at these things, you're not going to get very far. So you're just seeing the same hoarders, the same green grass, and hearing the same mundane chiptune over and over and over again. Maybe I'm underselling this game's true value or potential or whatever the case may be, but I don't know. I'm struggling as to whether I'm underwhelmed or just whelmed by this game. What was I expecting out of Vampire Survivors? I don't know, but I know this much. This roguelike stuff, or whatever you want to call it, is not for me. Mind you, I figured that point out with the Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate game, which came out like some time ago, which is also a roguelike thing, but at least that felt like a more fleshed out game, whereas Vampire Survivors doesn't. Vampire Survivor is just a guy you move around while monsters roam at you and your guy occasionally attacks. In concept, this would have been fine for a mobile action game, but in execution, this feels pretty dull. I mean, if this were like twin-stick shooting fare, like a Robotron, things of that nature, I'd probably be more into it, or at least make some semblance of sense with some of the weapons here. I mean, a whip that only attacks left or right in an overhead game? Are you fucking shitting me? I mean, like I said, the game looks like an old Flash game from the old days, but obviously performs much better here. The movement is a lot more smoother here in general. A lot of tiny pixely sprites and monster designs that look to have taken inspiration from that one game there, and further reminding me of a game that I wish I were playing right now instead of this. I do like the treasure chest animation when you open one up, that's at least exciting, but I don't know, the music is, it exists. The sound effects also exist. There's an attempt at a sort of retro throwback vibe with the overall presentation that some people will dig, but others, doesn't work for me, brother. So yeah, that was my experience with Vampire Survivors, a popular game among the kiddies and adults or whatever whose popularity baffles me and whose addictive nature obviously had no effect on me. Sure, I logged on a few hours here and there, but I had my fix, I know what it's all about, and I have no need to give this another shot anytime soon. Not exactly the most insightful analysis or whatever the case may be or whatever this was, I don't know, but at least it was honest. Then again, Vampire Survivors is one of those things that may very well defy criticism. It's either something that grabs you and keeps you coming back for more, going so far as to get all the DLC stuff with all the crossover stuff or whatever the case may be, or it's something you try once and you move on to something else. In my case, it was the latter, but for you, perhaps it might be the former, or at least could very well be. This is very much a mileage varying game, and it's simply not for me. And again, that's fine. If you're into this sort of thing, that's also fine. The important thing is, I give it 2 years before Absolute Superman gets a proper haircut. Good night. One last note before we end this properly. I realize basing thoughts on a whole game from a trial run is probably somewhat skewed. And I get it, people would think that. But on the flip side, if a game doesn't grab me, it doesn't grab me. One slightly skewed viewpoint on a game that you like shouldn't dampen your overall enjoyment of this game otherwise, and if it does, well, that's entirely on you. There's not much I can do there. Can we get there we go. Anyways, thanks. Bye.